There comes a moment when you stop reaching out. Not to test anyone, not to punish, not to make a statement. You simply pause. You decide to see what happens if you're not the one holding things together. And what happens is quieter than you expected. No messages, no questions, no one asking why you've gone still. Silence feels different when you didn't create it. You just stopped preventing it. At first, you tell yourself it's just timing. Everyone is busy. This doesn't mean anything. But as the days pass, a gentle realization settles in. You weren't stepping away from connection. You were stepping away from being the only one keeping it alive. If you've ever felt that quiet ache when you stopped reaching out and nothing came back, this isn't about rejection. It's about noticing how much effort was coming from you. And this conversation is for that moment of clarity that arrives without drama and changes how you see everything. 1. Pausing instead of chasing. You didn't decide to stop reaching out all at once. It happened quietly. You skipped one message, then another. Not because you were upset, but because you were tired. Sometimes pausing isn't withdrawal. It's listening. You wanted to know what the relationship would do without your constant effort. So you paused. You didn't announce it. You didn't explain. You simply stepped back and waited. At first, it felt uncomfortable. You were used to being the one who kept things moving, who filled the space. So silence felt unnatural. But as the pause stretched on, you noticed something. The relationship didn't lean toward you. It stayed exactly where it was when you stopped holding it. That realization didn't arrive with anger. It arrived with clarity. You weren't pulling away. You were giving the connection a chance to show whether it could stand on its own. If you've ever paused to see what would happen, it doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you stopped chasing. And there's a difference. Chasing is fueled by fear. Fear of loss. Fear of being forgotten. Pausing is fueled by honesty. It's the moment you allow silence to speak for itself. And what it reveals can change how you understand your role in the relationship. 2. The silence that follows. The silence doesn't arrive loudly. It slips in. A day passes, then another. And nothing fills the space you used to occupy. Silence feels heavier when you're the one who stopped preventing it. At first, you make excuses. They're busy. They'll reach out soon. This doesn't mean anything. But as time moves on, the silence remains unchanged. No check-in, no curiosity, no moment of noticing. And that's when the silence starts to say something. Not about them, but about the dynamic you were part of. You realize how much effort was coming from you, how often you initiated, how consistently you kept things alive, and how quickly the connection went quiet without that effort. That realization can sting, not because you wanted attention, but because you wanted reciprocity. You weren't asking to be chased. You were hoping the relationship would lean back even slightly. If you've ever sat in that silence, watching days pass, it doesn't mean you were unimportant. It means the connection had grown dependent on your presence. And silence, in this moment, isn't punishment. It's information. It's showing you what the relationship looks like without you doing the work for both sides. That awareness can feel lonely, but it's also honest. And honesty, even when it hurts, has a way of clearing space for something truer to enter. 3. When absence reveals effort. Your absence doesn't change the relationship. It reveals it. When you stop reaching out, nothing dramatic happens. There's no confrontation, no sudden realization, just a stillness that makes something clear. Absence doesn't break connection. It shows who was holding it. You begin to see how much energy you were putting in, how often you were the one bridging gaps, smoothing over distance, keeping things warm. Without you doing that, the connection doesn't deepen. It simply pauses. And in that pause, you notice something important. You weren't meeting halfway. You were carrying most of the weight. That realization can feel disorienting because you didn't think of yourself as doing more. You thought of yourself as caring. But caring, over time, had quietly turned into compensation. You were filling in for what wasn't being offered back. When you step away and nothing reaches toward you, it can hurt. Not because you expected effort, but because you hoped your presence mattered enough to be noticed when it was gone. If you've ever felt that quiet ache, it doesn't mean you misjudged everything. It means your absence is giving you a clearer picture than your effort ever could. And clarity, even when it's uncomfortable, is a form of respect. It shows you the truth without asking you to keep working for it. That truth may not be easy, but it's honest. And honesty is where healing begins. 4. Grieving what you hoped was mutual. There's a quiet grief that follows this realization. Not the kind that demands tears, the kind that settles in slowly. You grieve not just the silence, but the hope you were carrying. Sometimes what hurts most isn't what happened. It's what you believed was shared. You believed the care went both ways, that the effort you gave was being felt, even if it wasn't shown. You believed that if you ever stopped, someone would notice. So when that doesn't happen, something inside you softens, not in anger, in sadness. Because you weren't asking for proof. You weren't demanding reassurance. You were simply holding a quiet hope that the relationship mattered to both of you. Letting go of that hope can feel heavier than letting go of the relationship itself, because hope made it meaningful. Hope made it worth the effort. And now you're left honoring that effort without the confirmation you expected. If you've felt this grief, it doesn't mean you were naive. It means you were open. You allowed yourself to believe in mutual care, and that belief came from sincerity, not illusion. Grieving what you hoped was mutual isn't weakness. It's the natural response to discovering that your heart was offering something real to a space that couldn't return it, and acknowledging that grief is part of respecting what you gave, even if it wasn't met. 5. Why this realization hurts. This realization doesn't hurt because someone left. It hurts because no one noticed when you stepped back. Being unseen hurts deeper than being told no. You weren't expecting grand gestures. You weren't waiting for apologies. You were simply hoping your absence would register, that someone would pause and think, something feels different. Where did they go? When that moment never comes, the pain isn't sharp. It's hollow, because it touches something tender, your sense of mattering. You start to question yourself. Was I that easy to miss? Did my presence really make a difference? And those questions can quietly erode the way you see your own worth. Not because your worth changed, but because it wasn't reflected back to you. Humans learn about their value through being responded to, through being noticed, through being remembered. So, when your absence creates no ripple, it can feel like your effort never existed at all. But that feeling is misleading. Your care was real. Your presence was real. The pain comes from realizing the relationship could absorb your giving without needing to acknowledge it. If this realization hurts, it doesn't mean you depended too much. It means you invested sincerely. And sincerity, when it isn't met, always leaves a mark. That mark isn't weakness. It's evidence that your heart was open. And open hearts feel deeply when they're not seen. 6. Self-worth after being unseen. After a while, the silence stops surprising you. What lingers instead is a quieter question about yourself. Being unseen can quietly shake how you measure your own worth. You begin to wonder if you mattered less than you thought. Not because anyone said so, but because no one responded when you stepped back. And when that happens, it's easy to confuse absence of response with absence of value. But they are not the same. Your worth was never created by how often someone reached out. It was never dependent on how much space you filled in someone else's life. Still, being unseen can hurt deeply because humans are wired to feel real through reflection. When no one reflects you back, your sense of self can feel blurred. If you've been sitting with that quiet doubt, please hear this gently. Your value didn't disappear when you stopped reaching out. What disappeared was the imbalance that required your constant effort to be felt. You didn't become invisible. You simply stopped compensating for a lack of reciprocity. And that pause, as painful as it feels, is also an act of self-respect. It's the moment you stop proving your worth through effort and begin remembering that worth exists even in silence. 7. Choosing where your energy goes now. After the silence settles, a choice begins to form. Not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly. Healing begins when you choose where your energy belongs. You realize you don't have to chase connection to prove it matters. You don't have to keep offering yourself to places that remain unchanged, no matter how much you give. So you start listening inward. You notice what drains you, what leaves you feeling smaller, what requires effort without return. And slowly you begin to redirect. Not in anger, not with resentment, but with care. You give your energy to conversations that feel mutual, to moments that respond when you show up, to spaces where your presence doesn't need to be justified. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop overextending. You allow relationships to exist at the level they can genuinely meet you. No higher, no lower. And in doing so, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter. Not because you gained something new, but because you stopped carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. Choosing where your energy goes isn't about closing your heart. It's about protecting it so it can remain open in the right places. And that choice, made quietly, is one of the most respectful things you can do for yourself. 8. You didn't disappear. If you stopped reaching out and no one noticed, please know this: you didn't disappear. You didn't vanish. You stopped overextending. Your absence wasn't a failure. It was a moment of truth. It showed you how much of the connection was being carried by you. And while that realization can hurt, it also brings clarity. You are still here, still thoughtful, still capable of deep connection. Nothing about your value changed when you stepped back. What changed was the illusion that effort alone could create balance. If tonight feels quieter than usual, let that quiet be gentle, not empty, not punishing, just honest. You don't need to rush to fill the space again. You don't need to explain yourself. Let this pause be a place where you rest, where you remember that connection should not require you to disappear inside it. And if you choose to reach again one day, let it be from fullness, not from fear of being forgotten. You were never invisible. You were simply holding too much. And now, you are allowed to put some of it down.